Hi, my name's Nick Paquin, and today I'm going to be talking to you about play. Play in regards to why it's important for our children and why it's important for us as adults as well. Play is any activity done specifically for the purpose of fun and enjoyment. Play is a series of activities that's specifically intrinsically motivated. What that means is play needs to come from us. It needs to come from our inner soul and our inner being. It needs to come from our own will and our own want to do it. It's kind of the source of true quote-unquote fun. It's just such a true experience and one of the most effective ways for dealing with stress and anxiety. One of my first experiences of when I learned how important play is was when I first started in my job and working for the public school division. I worked with a young gentleman in grade 5. It was a huge learning experience for me as the quote-unquote professional. He was a student that had experienced a significant amount of trauma in his life. His parents really struggled to provide for his needs. They really struggled to support the emotional aspects of his life. And because of that, he was actually removed from his biological family and put into a foster care situation. This is where I met him. He was already in foster care and he was in grade 5 at one of our schools here in Medicine Hat. He really struggled academically, but he was so excited about life. He had the myriad of doctors' diagnosis, ADHD, the whole mantra on him. I was bound and determined I was going to be the quote-unquote the clinical therapist with him, and I tried a myriad of different things with him. And to be perfectly honest, he just wasn't interested in any of it. And after a couple sessions of trying and frustration on his part and my part, we came to the conclusion that we needed to go play. He was really interested at baseball. And at this point in our relationship, I didn't actually know if he knew how to play baseball. But making the assumption as an adult that he's in grade 5, that he should know the rules of baseball. So we were walking across the field and he was so excited. When he got to home plate, he actually stood right in the middle of home plate with the bat directly in his face like this, and he said, "Okay, throw the ball at me." So both of his feet were pointing towards me with the baseball bat like this. That was a big turning point for me. I really had to bring myself back that he had never been shown how to play that game before. No one had ever shown him how to stand before. He put a level of trust in me that I would have never seen if I would have been in a very traditional closed office environment with me. By me engaging in play with him, he was receptive to learning things from me, to learning how to hold the bat. By me being vulnerable with him, he was willing to be vulnerable with me. I would have never learned any of that if I wouldn't have engaged in play. It really made me stop and slow down and showed me the importance of play and being with him and actually being together with him to actually show him those important things. Play is the ignition source for the pleasure centers of our brain. And what I mean by that is play fires up all of the endorphin centers of our brain. When we as human beings are at play, there's so many natural body chemicals that are being released. Our muscles are relaxed. Our neck feels light. Our arms feel light. And this is not only true in our children, but for us as adults as well. It's one of the truest forms of the human experience when we allow ourselves to play. And play is one of the most authentic places that we can actually feel true togetherness as human beings. And that's why it's so important that we not only foster it in our children, but in ourselves as adults for a healthy life and for a healthy lifestyle. Play looks different at all of our developmental stages. For our little infants, play can look like those first smiles that we get as new parents. It can look like the first time that they figure out that they have fingers. For our toddlers, play can look like the fun and the enjoyment of first learning how to stack those first 5 blocks on top of each other. It can be the fun and enjoyment of wrestling with their parents or their caregivers. It can look like the digging through of the Tupperware, the dreaded Tupperware drawer that so many of us have as parents. It can look like that. That's exploratory play. That's the play that our toddlers need to be engaged in. Play for our preteens. It might look like the first time that they hang out with their friends outside. It might be going for a walk, learning how to rollerblade, learning how to play hockey. All those first experiences going beyond us as parents. For our teens, it could look like being with their friends outside and going for a walk. It could mean the first time that they go snowboarding, the first time that they leave town and go to summer camp. It's the first stages of them really trying to test out what adult life like, or being a little bit grown up and having that little bit more trust. For us as adults, we often overlook as adults that we need play too. Play for us could be going to the gym. It could be weightlifting. It could be boxing. Play could be going out for coffee with some of our friends. It could be doing yoga. It could be going for a walk with our partner. So the purpose of me explaining this and what the different parts of play is that play is so important throughout the lifespan. It needs to be a part of us. I know sometimes as adults it's really hard for us to play, and it really is hard to carve that time out to play, but it is important for us as adults, whether it's 5 minutes or if we can carve out an hour, that's great. Play is actually recognized by the United Nations as being essential to the development of our children, and it's written actually into our UN Constitution that children should have and do have the right to play and feel that enjoyment throughout their early years of development. So why is play important to our children? Play forms the foundation and the building blocks for our children's understanding of this world. Play is where our children first learn how to organize, how to stack, how to move things through a small world. It's where they learn to first put things together. This is where the building blocks for their experience of the world comes from, is from their play and them experiencing the world through that way. In play, our children have the opportunity to be the leader. They have the opportunity to be a follower. They have the opportunity to manipulate their world and really learn the intricacies of what it's like to be a human being. Play gives children the opportunity to learn and to even reinforce learning that they might have seen around them. I don't know if anyone, as parents or caregivers, I should say, are willing to admit when you might have said something that might have been short or something to to a partner or something, and then you see your child off in the corner, maybe with two little figurines or something, and they're having the conversation, and then you realize what you might have sounded like. And I think most of us as caregivers have been here before, and it gives us real insight. The fact that our children are listening to us so closely. It's very well documented that play reduces stress in our children's environment. Play is the language of our children. Without play, without the basic building blocks of play, our children do not move forward in their development. So that's why it's so important for us as adults that we really make sure that our children have ample opportunities to have those moments of play throughout the day and throughout their lifespan. Play is such an effective tool for us as parents and caregivers to connect with our children. I'm talking about a deep nervous system, kind of almost like a heartfelt soul connection with our children. But that only comes when we as adults and we as parents and caregivers allow ourselves to get to that point. As human beings, we crave connections, and we're actually built for it. We're built and we're designed specifically to connect with our children. Play allows for that. It allows us to meet with our kids and be with them in a way that's almost magical, and it almost goes beyond words. Time kind of melts away, and that's a true feeling of connection. And connection is being together, and it's having those moments together that truly mean something in the lives of our children and us as adults. In our brain, I love talking about this. There's something in our brain called mirror neurons. What they're designed specifically to do is model ourselves after the environment that it is in. It's a survival mechanism that allows our bodies to recognize the environment around them. So when we're together with our children in play, those mirror neurons, if they see us in a moment of true enjoyment, those mirror neurons actually allow their bodies to calm, for their chest to loosen, for their back. It's almost like a moment of pure joy. I was actually in a moment of pure joy with my children. It was after supper, and it was after the stress of trying to get supper into them. We were in the living room space together, and all that mattered was actually giving airplane rides to my 2 little girls, to getting them to backflip onto the couch. That moment, it just reminded me what matters. It's that true connection, that being together. Those are the moments that truly matter, and they can come so easily and most effectively when we play and we allow ourselves to relax and be with our children in those moments. I know sometimes for us as parents and caregivers, it's tough to allow ourselves to engage in play. We've got dishes to do. We've got lunches to be made. We've got supper to be made. What I really hope you hear me say is that we need to carve that time out, that we need to allow ourselves to come to a place of relaxation, to give ourselves a breath, to give ourselves a break, and allow and give ourselves permission to be with our children and play, whether that means getting right down on the floor with them and playing with those blocks, playing Barbies, whatever that might mean, or heaven forbid that we go outside in a rainstorm and we jump in those puddles and we run through that mud and really get that, engage in that icky, sticky play that's really hard for us as adults. But I encourage you to allow yourself to be vulnerable and allow yourself to have that true play experience when you're with your children. Playing catch. I know it sounds simple, but playing catch with our children is an extremely effective way of communicating and interacting with our children in play. When you think about playing catch, there's actually a lot of vulnerability in playing catch. For the vulnerability of mistake and them throwing it over your head and you passing it back to them, you're allowing for trust to be built, that I'm not going to throw it too hard and injure you. You're also allowing for eye contact and communication to happen during those times. For me as a caregiver or as a friend, to maybe give you a couple tips on how you can throw or catch better in that moment. Those small moments of play are very powerful. It's very rhythmic. It's back and forth. It's serve and return. It's a moment when in a very simple task that you can truly have those connection moments of trust. Goes deeper. It's almost like a nervous system connection of the back and forth motion together, engaging in something that hopefully is fun for everyone. I grew up as part of an agricultural family, and as a part of being a part of that family, I got to go with my dad out to the farm, and we were in the middle of spring seeding, and it's a pretty stressful time because you're trying to get the crop in the ground before the summer comes, so you'll be able to harvest in the fall. So I was with my dad in the tractor, and it was one of those days. We were driving down the field, and he actually got stuck in the mud. So the big tractor we were driving and the thing we were pulling behind it, he buried it in a big mud puddle or a slough. That's very frustrating for someone that's trying to get their crop into the ground. And I remember he was kind of frustrated, but I was 8 years old at the time, so he was trying to hold it together for me as we were, as he was going back and forth, trying to get this big stuck tractor. And if anyone is from an agricultural background, you can understand the frustration that he was going through. He was trying to get things done, and here he is stuck in the mud. As he was going back and forth, trying to get the tractor out, something broke. It was a hydraulic line. It was an oil line on the implement that he was pulling, and it started spraying oil everywhere. So I remember him opening the door and running down and trying to stop this oil leak, this hydraulic leak that was happening behind him. And in the process, he was getting mud all over him, and he was getting oil all over him from this hose that was spraying around. So I remember so vividly being an 8-year-old kid, jumping down out of the tractor and kind of walking up behind him. And I remember my dad covered in oil, muddy all the way up, like all covered in just mud and oil and grease. And I remember him in just almost like a true moment of frustration of him, like kind of on his knees, and his back was to me. And it was so powerful because he knew I was directly behind him. So we actually made a mud, I don't know why I'm getting emotional about this, because it was actually a happy moment. He made a kind of like a mud snowball, a big mud ball, and he turned around and he threw it at me. And what was powerful about that moment is he showed me that even in the midst of the muck, being covered in oil, being covered in grease, that there's still that moment for play. There's still those happy things that can come from that. And he said to me, like, we're really in it and we'll get this figured out together. So, in the midst of, of him trying to get his crop in the ground and that those moments of frustration, he took that time to play and to show me what it truly looked like to almost still have enjoyment and have that play moment in the midst of being stuck in the mud and being covered in oil. Play therapy is the most empirically evidence-based supported therapeutic techniques for working with children. The real power in therapeutic play and the play therapy process is the fact that it's not reliant on words. Often our children, that part of their brain is not fully developed to be able to explain negative events that have happened in their life. The play therapy process doesn't rely on what a child is saying. We allow and we give them the opportunity to show us, to join in with us, and often they allow us to join in the play process with them. They show us what's going on in their life. They invite us in to their actual world, to their play world. That's not reliant on what they're saying. It could be, which is very powerful, but often they have the ability to show us maybe some negative events in their life. They might even invite us in to show us what's going well in their life. The longer that we allow them to play, they have the ability to move through the story and actually come to some sort of completion, which when we look at the therapeutic process, essentially that's what we do as adults when we work through with a therapist, when we talk to a therapist, is we start at a starting place and we work through that emotional journey. A lot of times without the words that we're saying, we work through that emotional journey with that therapist and come to a place of understanding and completion with that therapist. That's essentially what we're doing as people that work in play therapy or use therapeutic play, is we're inviting the children in. We're allowing them to begin their story. We're allowing them to move through a process where they have the ability to play out circumstances, to bring some understanding to the point where they might come to a place of that something might not have been their fault, that something might have been out of their control, that it's terrible that happened to them. And by bringing them and helping them move through the play process, we're allowing them to come to a place of understanding and a place of completion without the reliance on those traditional cognitive language-based models that we know children often don't have the cognition or the ability to move through as children. The use of toys and props during the play process allows them to use them as the form of language, the way that they're communicating with them, through them, to me or to themselves or to the person in the room. The use of toys allows them to transfer their fears, their anxieties, their worries. It allows them to transfer them into the objects, into the toys, into the props, and allows them to move through the healing process. If it wasn't for play, their body wouldn't be at a place where it's actually accepting for that healing during that time. The true play process for our children is a moment when their heart is at a lower rate, when their breathing is calm. And those are the only times that our children are actually able to move into the actual healing process and make sense of the world around them or the events that they've gone through in their lives. When children engage in play, they often will develop skills that will take them into adulthood. For example, cooperative skills, so the ability to work with others in a job or family-based setting. Fine gross motor skills, so skills that they might require to be successful in their area that they choose to go into. Skills of empathy, so their ability to recognize another person's feelings or emotions. In the spring of 2019, I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma cancer. It was a big deal in my life. I had just finished my graduate degree. Our second child was just born, and it was really hard getting the news that I had cancer. It was quite hard obviously for me, and it was quite hard for my wife, and we were quite worried about our children and about our life, which is, it's on the outside, it's very understandable. From that point I found out, I ended up doing 6 rounds of chemotherapy and then 2.5 months of radiation therapy to finally get rid of the cancer. It was a really difficult time in my life, and it was a difficult time for my family as a whole. We had 2 young children. My wife was just in the process of going back to work from her mat leave. There was lots of turmoil in our life at that time. I have to say, one of the things that stood out for us the most during that time is the fact that as a family, we could still be together and play. Some of the best memories I have of interacting and being together as a family came from that moment, of those random days of being together and even going to the beach on those days that I felt so sick. They were all made so much better by days that I allowed myself to go and play, to even if it was 5 minutes of playing. My daughters were quite a bit younger, so we would play lots of blocks, or we'd go outside and spray each other with the hose. Even if it was for 5 minutes, it made it so much better. Even though I was hurting so bad physically, the fact that I allowed myself to still go play, and it was a choice on my part to allow myself to relax and be together with my kids and my family at that moment. Like I said, some of the best memories that I have with my kids at that age came from when from one of the hardest health-wise that I've ever experienced in my life, that we've gone together as a family. Where that originally came from is, I had that example that I shared earlier of being with my dad of Stuck in the Mud. He showed me that even in the midst of the hardness, that we can still have those moments of play together. I think if I wouldn't have had that example from my father of showing me what it looks like to play, I would have really struggled to do that in the hardest moments of my life, to be with my children. And it hurt. And it was hard, but it was so worth it by the memories and the growth that I saw, not only in our children, that me and my wife saw in our children, but in ourselves at the exact same time. Friends, we need to seek out play in our own lives as adults. We need to foster that sense of enjoyment, that sense of togetherness for us as adults. We need to allow ourselves to relax and be and come to a true moment of quote unquote play, whatever that might mean in our life. It's so important for us as adults, for our children. I can't stress how important it is to the development of our children that we allow and we foster opportunities for them not to play, but for us to play and interact with our children in that, not only in communication and how we interact with them, but for them to see how we interact with the world, and that the fact that we're willing to be vulnerable and enjoy them and jump into their little world and be together in a moment of true enjoyment. It's so powerful in our mental health as parents, caregivers, and in the mental health and development of our children.